Getting to a band 7 or 8 in IELTS speaking is totally possible, even if the examiner is the first native English speaker you ever talk to. The key is to understand what the examiners value and give it to them. And that's exactly how Vijay and Sahil, our course students, improved their results from 6.5 to 7.5. In this super comprehensive video, I'll show you what really matters in parts 1, 2, and 3 of the speaking test and share some proven techniques you can use to improve your answers and your score. Starting with IELTS speaking part 1. 5 minutes, 3 topics, 11 questions. This part sets expectations for the rest of your exam. The topics may vary widely, from your home to favorite colors to wild animals to trees and all the topics you discuss every day. But the types of questions remain the same. The examiners ask these questions to encourage you to demonstrate certain English skills. So let's take one topic, look at the different types of questions, and learn how to give great answers. The first question is very general and often begins with do you or are you? Let's talk about bicycles. Do you ride a bicycle? Not unless I miss the bus. Just the one fixed to the floor in the gym. These answers are too short to really show your English skills. A very important thing you can do in your speaking exam is to extend your answers. How long should they be? In part 1, you have about 20-25 seconds per question. Maybe 3 sentences on average. Some answers can be a bit shorter or a bit longer, but not much longer. Otherwise, the examiner will stop you. Part 1 questions are mainly personal, so there is always a chance to give a personal example or talk about family and friends. Let's try again. Do you ride a bicycle? I do. Sometimes I ride my bike to work, mostly when my alarm clock breaks down and I miss the bus, or at least that's what I tell my boss. On the weekend, whenever I can, I go riding with a friend. It's a great way to socialize, get some exercise, and wonder why we didn't go to a cafe instead. Giving an example of what you do is a great way to extend your answer. Okay. Our first question is about the present. Do you? The second question may be about the past. Did you? Have you ever? When was the last time? For example, did you have a bicycle when you were a child? Now, in this answer, I want you to look for different ways to talk about the past. The examiner will. I did actually. Both of my parents were very keen cyclists, so they bought bicycles for me and my little sister. We used to go riding with them over the weekend. We had this roof rack on the car, and they'd put their own bicycles up there with ours in the boot, and off we go to the countryside. Here, we used 3 different ways to talk about the past. The past simple, of course. Did, were, bought. Also, used to. We used to go riding. This means we did this regularly but don't do it anymore. To be completely honest, we never did, and I don't even have a sister. But in IELTS, it doesn't matter. We could also use would. You see those D's? They'd go, we'd put, we would put, they would go. Again, something we used to do regularly but don't do anymore. If you could use some of these structures, it would be a plus. Examiners assess how varied and accurate your grammar is. Still, the most important thing in your exam is communicating with your examiner. So think about what you want to say first and don't worry if you make some mistakes. Let's return to our question types. Question number 5. Once you answer questions about yourself, you may be asked about others. Do many people in your country? For example, do many people in your country ride bicycles? Another thing the examiners pay attention to is if you link your sentences together so your answer flows. In speaking, we use simple linkers like this. Unfortunately, no, at least not in the cities because the roads are very congested with cars and buses. It's really not safe to ride around on a bike. However, you do see a lot more people using them in small towns and villages, especially in the eastern part of the country where it's quite flat. We have a couple of linkers, at least not in the cities, and however, to show the contrast, in our case, the contrast between the cities and the villages. Another type of question is about the future. Do you think people will do something more or less in the future? In our case, ride bicycles. Another aspect examiners assess is your vocabulary. How many words do you know? How many mistakes do you make? They pay attention to the so-called less common words. Okay, which words in our next answer would you consider less common? Probably more. With how bad traffic jams are getting, I think bicycles might actually start looking like the faster option. I think people are also becoming more conscious of the need to cut carbon emissions. Any less common words? A few, I think. Traffic jams, conscious, and carbon emissions. You don't need super complex words, just some less common ones. Generally, don't try and use words if you're not sure of their meanings. Don't use long words just because you think the examiner will be impressed. Take the word siblings. Does it mean the same as brothers and sisters? Oh, kinda yes. But would you say, my sibling and I were always fighting? Well, you shouldn't really. This word is more formal than that. Just say, my brother and I fought all the time, and no one will doubt your vocabulary skills with that one. What we could commonly say is, I guess it was a case of sibling rivalry. So sibling rivalry means competition between brothers and sisters, and this is a collocation, two words we commonly use together. What I want to say is, choose words you know and don't try to deliberately complicate your speech. If you'd like to have a library of challenging IELTS speaking topics with sample answers and useful vocabulary, you may wish to check out our IELTS speaking library. It covers over 40 topics from real exams and will regularly add new topics. Some of our lucky students even got these topics in their actual exams, although this is definitely not guaranteed. You can also download questions only without the answers and vocabulary for free on our Telegram channel. Both links are in the description below. And now let's summarize what we've covered so far. Extend your answers 20-25 seconds each. Give personal examples. Use varied and accurate grammar. Use spoken linkers to connect ideas. Use less common words. Avoid words if you are not sure of their meanings. As for our question types, there are some other types you may be asked. Do you prefer? Would you like to? How often do you? Why do you? What would you like about, or what do you like about? Is there any? Like, is there any traditional food you enjoy in your country? To keep this video reasonably short, we're not gonna look into them, but if you'd like to take a print screen of these questions, feel free to do it now. And I wanna show you something interesting. When most IELTS students prepare for their speaking test, they spend a lot of time on part 1, less on part 2, and even less on part 3. When the examiners score your test, they see part 1 as the first impression, important but not decisive, while parts 2 and 3 are really key to determining your score. And there are two things in particular that are extremely important in part 2, but not in part 1. So let me show you what these are and how you can give a brilliant answer even if the topic is hard and you don't know what to say about it. Part 2 is a so-called long turn. The instructions tell you to talk for 1 to 2 minutes. But here is the first important tip. Aim to talk for 2 minutes until the examiner stops you. Don't worry if you don't finish the story. What worries a lot of test takers is whether we will like the topic. I mean, whether we find it easy to talk about because we have some experience. So let's imagine we know next to nothing. What can we do in this situation? Here is the topic. Describe a person you know who plays a musical instrument. You should say who this person is, how you know this person, what music he or she plays, and explain why playing a musical instrument is important for this person. If you find the topic hard, let's imagine you know next to nothing about musical instruments. Try to find a story that is easy to tell. Don't go for describing a friend playing the violin professionally if you don't have the vocabulary. So choose something easy, maybe something from when you were younger. How about school? A music teacher? Before I show you how you can give a band 8 or 8.5 answer if you don't know much about the topic, there are two things you need to understand about part 2 first. Number 1, make connections. What's especially interesting to the examiner in part 2 is how we connect all the bits together. So the long-term part 2 is a test of how fluent and coherent you are. You're coherent if you can tell a good story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're fluent if you can talk for 2 minutes without too much effort. And that takes us to the ways we join ideas together. So pay attention to how it's done in the answer. The second thing is to keep the sequence. Let's be clear, you don't have to follow the bullet points. Yes, you can just tell a story and it's a great approach in some situations. But if you struggle to find what to say, the safest bet is to build your answer around each of them. There are always 4, and each bullet point requires an increasingly complex answer. So let's see how the level of complexity will go up throughout the answer, and also why the last point is the most important one. Okay, our 2 focus areas are connecting our ideas and building around those bullet points. Let's have a look at the answer. Who the person is. One little tip is to choose someone who's not your close relative, so you can describe who this person is. An easy way to start is to paraphrase the topic and add that it was the examiner who asked you to talk about it. You've asked me to talk about someone who can play a musical instrument, so I'm going to talk about my former music teacher at school. His name is Mr. Strings. Our topic is about playing musical instruments, so let me confirm that he can play some. And he plays more than one instrument, actually. He can play the piano, the guitar, and a couple of wind instruments. Nothing extraordinary. Bullet point 1 is usually simple. Number 2, how you know the person. This type of question is great for some storytelling, and this means using verbs in the past and connecting events together. So pay attention to the words used to connect ideas. I first met Mr. Strings when I started high school. He taught music to our class in the first 3 years, from about age 11 to 14. After that, music was an optional subject and I didn't take it. Not because I didn't enjoy it, but because I have no ear for music at all, I'm afraid. I couldn't sing, and even Mr. Strings couldn't get me beyond the basics with the recorder. We used a couple of linkers to create this sequence. First, after that, not because, even he. Make sure you include these linkers in your answer. We also have a couple of idiomatic expressions. To have ear for music means to recognize and copy sounds. You need to have a good ear to master the violin. Or you may have no ear for music. A great idiom to know. Get me beyond the basics. This is an interesting expression meaning to learn more to become more advanced. As the talk continues, it's a chance to take things to a more complex level using more complex grammar. The next bullet point is what music he or she plays. As for the music he played, I think that depends on if you're talking about the music he played to earn his living as a teacher or his passion. At school, it was the traditional stuff, piano accompaniments to the school choir. I was always impressed by how he could keep a straight face when half the class was butchering jingle bells. Here, the sentences are longer and more complex because the ideas are more complex. It depends on if impressed how he could when. By the way, to earn his living is how you earn money to live on, to earn your living. And to keep a straight face is not to show emotions. And to butcher, well, you can imagine what a school class can do to Jingle Bells or any other song for that matter. To further extend the answer, we can add a little story about the person we are describing. But I think it was about a year after I finished school. I would have been around 19 when I randomly saw Mr. Strings play the piano with a jazz band at a local jazz festival. It was really nice to see him up on the stage enjoying himself. If he hadn't made a living as a teacher, I'm pretty sure he could have become the next big name in jazz. Here we have some complex verb tenses. I would have been. That's the past modal. It shows that I'm guessing something about the past. And the last sentence is conditional type 3. If he hadn't made a living as a teacher, he could have become. This is an unreal past situation, something that hadn't happened because in reality, he's a music teacher. You don't have to use grammar like this, but I'm showing you where you can go if you're more fluent and can get a band 9. And the last bullet point is very important because it calls for even more complex language. So memorize this rule and don't forget it. Cover the last bullet point in your answer. And our last bullet point is explain why playing a music instrument is important for this person. I guess music is his life. It's his way of expressing his feelings. I remember how he used to tell us that music is a universal language that could bring people together from all parts of the world without the need for words, just sounds. And I think he was absolutely right when he said that. If you finish a bit early, the examiner will probably make a gesture asking you to continue and say something else. Once your time is up, you'll hear a follow-up question. Tip: keep your answer to the follow-up question short. Here's how it goes. Have you talked to anyone else about this person? Yes, my old friends from school. I moved away from the city, but they tell me he's still teaching and playing jazz. Showing your fluency or ability to tell a coherent, logical story where ideas flow one from another is key to part 2. Now, what matters in part 3 as some would argue the most important part of the test. In this part, the examiners look for very specific skills, and I'll show you how to demonstrate them and why harder questions are better for you. IELTS Speaking Part 3 is less predictable. It's aimed to push you to the limit to prove how good your English skills really are. The examiner doesn't read questions from a list, like in Part 1. They can decide what to ask you to a certain extent. And they can choose easier or more difficult questions for you. And the next fact may surprise you. The harder the questions in Part 3, the better. Let me explain why, what questions you may expect, and how to answer them to get the score you really want in your test. Part 3 continues on from Part 2. Let's say our Part 2 topic was this. Describe an interesting place in your country where not many tourists go. As soon as Part 2 ends, the examiner will say, "We've been talking about an interesting place in your country where not many tourists go, and I'd like to ask you some more general questions related to this. Let's consider first of all." So it takes Part 2 as a basis. Taking our topic of tourism, the examiner's booklet will have 3 sets of questions. Set 1 is easier, set 3 is the most difficult. And here is why harder questions are better. Examiners often choose sets 1 and 2 for test takers between bands 5 and 6, and sets 2 and 3 or 1 and 3 for those around band 7 or higher. So whatever set of questions you get, your Part 3 answers should follow these rules. Short answers are not enough in Part 3. Give examples and reasons and look at the issue from 2 points of view. Don't talk about your personal experiences if you can help it. The idea is to get away from your personal stories of Parts 1 and 2 and talk about people in general. Let's look at a brief example. Do you agree that all tourist attractions should be free of charge? This probably wouldn't be your first question, but it presents an important issue. Do you actually agree? Maybe not. Don't be afraid to disagree, but do it politely. Well, I'm not sure they should all be free. It depends. Saying you disagree is fine. Just try to put it softly, not "this is wrong." So I'm giving a short answer. Now you can weigh different points of view or present both sides. And this is a great way to give an extended answer. I believe it's important for people to have access to museums and art galleries, but maintaining these sites comes with significant costs. If everything were free, these places would struggle financially and eventually deteriorate. That's why charging a reasonable entry fee ensures they can be maintained properly. That said, there could still be discounts or free access for certain groups, such as students or senior citizens, to make it more inclusive. However, I'd say that most people should contribute. This answer explores both sides, why they should and should not be free, and gives a more balanced view. You can, of course, say that they should all be free if that's what you think. There are no right or wrong answers. All you need is to explain why you think so. Some of the questions may touch on even wider issues, like mass tourism. Remember, the examiner is trained to ask follow-up questions to get you to extend your answers and to see if you can support your point of view. So this is a typical set 2 question. Let's go on to talk about the impact of tourism. What about the effect of mass tourism on the environment? In many ways, the effect has been very negative. These days, it's so easy for so many people to take these package tours to holiday destinations, and that is ruining these places. thanks to the numbers involved and the infrastructure needed to accommodate them, like hotels, restaurants, and shops built next to the places of natural beauty. The answer is not very long, so the examiner will ask a follow-up question. What can be done about this? Is the answer to ban tourists from visiting certain places? That's a really difficult question because there are other issues involved, such as our individual freedom to choose where we want to go. But at the same time, if the numbers of tourists allowed to visit certain places could be limited in some ways, that could be one way to preserve these places. One example would be Venice in Italy, where you have to pay to enter the city center. That's a good answer. Next, there can be moments when you find it hard to understand the question. Look at this set 3 question. What are the chances of virtual travel replacing real travel in the future? In part 3, if you're not sure what certain words mean, you can ask. For example, I'm sorry, what do you mean when you say virtual travel? Or you can ask if you understand the question correctly. Do you mean putting those big goggles and traveling in virtual reality? By the way, in part 1, you can only ask to repeat the question. Okay, here is the answer. Well, it seems that technology is advancing so fast that virtual travel is becoming feasible. We already have those virtual reality headsets for gaming, so it's not far-fetched to think we could use similar technology for immersive travel experiences. Imagine putting on a headset and virtually climbing on top of Mount Everest, all from the comfort of your sofa. Well, I don't think it could ever fully replace the real thing for a million of reasons, but it could definitely be an interesting option for some people. If your answers don't sound like this, don't worry. These are model answers, and you're not expected to know much about the topics. But try to extend your answers and explore the question from different sides. To make sure you get a high band score, at least a 7, you must show the examiner that you're confident speaking on any topic, that your grammar is reasonably good, mostly error-free, that you can handle the basics well, such as verb tenses in the present, past, and future, as well as some more complex structures, such as conditional forms. Apart from that your vocabulary is varied, with some examples of less common vocabulary and idiomatic language. And we mustn't forget pronunciation. It should be easy to understand you because your pronunciation is clear and the way you connect phrases together sounds natural. It's not about your accent. The only part we haven't touched on today is how to introduce yourself at the very beginning of your exam. This is what this video is about. After all, there is only one chance to make a great first impression. Thank you so much for watching me today. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye!